Hey everyone, welcome back today to the second day of our Netflix build, which we are working on. As you all remember, yesterday we finished this part. We built the whole homepage UI, completely responsive from scratch. So we built this whole UI, completely responsive UI, as you all can see, right? It's completely responsive, you know. So we built this yesterday in our build. Now today we're gonna be implementing the custom login using a custom authentication hook which we're gonna be creating. So this is the finished build, and we also deployed yesterday to Vercel. If you all remember, we deployed our build. So this is our deployed build. So we deployed it to Vercel as well, and today at the end of the day also we're gonna deploy it again to Vercel. And tomorrow is gonna be our last day. So today is the second day. So now let's get started with this. So what we're gonna be building today is, if I go back to my account page, and this is the finished application, right? And this, if I try to sign out, this is our login page, right? And we're gonna be building this beautiful login screen, right? Where we can sign up, and you can see we have React hook form we're gonna be using. It's our validation. It's gonna allow us to validate and stuff. So we're gonna be building this. And now if I try to log in to my account, sign in, it's actually gonna take me to the application. So I'm actually logged in now, and now I can actually see the banners, and I can see my thumbnails because I'm logged in right now. And I can also see, if I go to my account, I can see my email here. So this is dynamic, it's done with Firebase, and we're going to be using Firebase authentication as our backend. And if I actually go to Firebase authentication, you will see that I'm authenticated, and this is the email ID I'm authenticated to, right? And the sign-in method is email and password, which is actually enabled. We are not using Google sign-in, but I have shown before in my previous videos how to implement Google social logins, which is pretty straightforward. It's actually the same way we're going to be implementing the email and password login. This build, I just wanted to do something a bit different. So let's get started with this. The first thing you're going to be doing is we want to go to firebase.google.com, and you want to go to your console. And the first thing we want to do is we want to add a project, and our project needs to be, we want to give a project a name. I'm just going to say Netflix clone YT, and you can choose to enable analytics, or you can just disable it. I'm just disable it for this build, and this is going to create and initialize our project. Let's get back to our code. So this is our code. So so far we just have 1, 2, 3, 4 components: a banner, a header, a row, a thumbnail, and we have our home page. And what we want to build today is our login page, right? That's what we're going to build today. And our project is ready on Firebase. I'm going to click continue, and this is what we should see for the first time. If you're using Firebase, this is what you should see. This is the screen you want to get to. The next thing you want to do is you want to click on, so there are 3 options. You can create an iOS app, an Android, or a web app. Since we are going to be working on a web app only, so we're going to click on this web icon, and we have to register our application here. So to register our app, I'm just going to give the same exact name to be consistent. So I'm just going to say Netflix clone YT, and we're not using Firebase hosting, so we can just register app. So these are the steps to set up a Firebase project, and then we're going to link our Firebase to our code base here by initializing Firebase. And this is how we're going to be adding the Firebase SDK. This is how we're going to be linking. So first thing we want to do is actually install Firebase. So open our terminal. On the second terminal, I'll keep this running. So on the second terminal, I'll just install Firebase, npm install. And the next thing we want to do is we want to copy this, and you want to create a file inside of our code, and it's going to be called firebase.ts, right? It's going to be firebase.typescript. We want to paste this bunch of code, and this is really important because we're going to be needing this configuration. We're going to be needing this configuration, and this actually sets up your configuration when you register your application. So we're going to be needing this. And if you're actually new, if you're using Firebase for the first time, I'd suggest to use install Firebase globally. so you don't have to install it again. But I've already installed Firebase right now for our project. Now we also wanna once we install this and once you have this Firebase.TypeScript file, because we are actually using Next.js, we have to protect ourselves, and this file we have to protect in a way if the app is already initialized, we don't want to reinitialize the app, right? Because we only want to have one instance of our application. So the correct way we actually do that is in the finished build, you'll see that I have this Firebase.TypeScript. All we want to do is actually copy this one and go back to our app and just change this with this code here. Now what we are doing here is we're making a check here for our app, and we are importing some functions. And again, this is Firebase version 9, by the way. This is not version 8, so it's more modular now in Firebase version 9. So we're getting these functions: authentication, get Firestore, which allows us to use Firestore. Authentication allows us to use authentication, and we're initializing. So we're checking if our app is already not initialized. If it's not, then we're initializing. If it's already initialized, then we actually just initialize. And this is because we're using Next.js. So Next.js server-side running. So we have to make sure that we actually do this, right? But this Firebase configuration, I'm just gonna change it to the new one here. And if you want to get back to this again, you can just go to settings and just from here just get this configuration, because I'm going to be using this one now. So I'll just change this configuration. Now let's get back to our app and let's start working on our login page. So let's go to login.tsx. Let's start working. Let me make this side by side so make it easier for everyone to see. And now let's actually work on the login page, right? So since you're on the login page, what we can do is in Next.js, since we have file-based routing, I can just navigate to login and we can see we just have login here, right? So let me just go to our login page. And yeah, guys, let's start working on the login screen. So let me just open our login page on my other screen and let's start working on this. And let me know if you guys are excited for this. Yeah, this is gonna be a sick build today. It's gonna be an intense day. We're gonna be building our custom hooks. You're gonna be doing a lot of cool things today. So first thing we wanna do inside our login screen is we wanna have a head. And what I mean by a head is, remember when I showed you in the beginning on the top, Next.js gives us these beautiful head components, and these are really good for SEO, by the way. So we wanna copy this, go back to our login, and when I get this, and you wanna just auto import this from next/head. And what we wanna do is we wanna just change this to Netflix, just simply Netflix. That's all we have to change this to. The next thing we wanna do is we wanna also have image, and this is gonna be a Next.js image component. And of course, this is just gonna be for the logo. So again, we'll just quickly go here to the login screen and just quickly get the logo. Because you want to just get the URL, and you should do the same if you want to get the source. So I've already shortened the source by this, so you don't have to write this whole thing. If you want to write this, just go ahead and write this thing. But right now it's actually telling us that hostname rgb.gui. Remember, in next configuration we don't have this hostname, right? So we need to make sure that it actually exists. So it doesn't exist right now. So what we're going to do is copy the hostname, right, and just paste it. And since our next configuration is changed, we need to cut the server and run it again. So we're gonna do npm run dev again, and now run the server again here. And by mistake I closed the build. Let's go to localhost 3000 again, localhost 3000, and let's just go to login and let's see if it works. So now our login page is actually working, right? This should give us this image. The reason right now it's not working is because we we have layout fill, and we don't have its div. The containing div needs to be relative or absolute. So the containing div, we're going to say relative. We're going to say display flex, height of screen, and a width of screen, a flex column. We're going to change the flex direction. We're going to make the background to black. And on a medium breakpoint, we're going to say I want all of our align items to be centered and justify to be centered as well. And also on a medium breakpoint, we want our background to be transparent. And as soon as I actually do that, immediately we see that this has changed. But we still don't actually see the image, right? We still don't see the image. So let's actually make this bigger. Let's refresh this once again, and now as soon as I refresh, I actually see the image. But on a smaller screen, I actually don't see the image. The reason why is because we actually have this hidden in the class name, and we are actually hiding the image on phone screens, and we are only showing this image on a smaller breakpoint, which is 640 pixels. And the reason we are actually doing that is because this is how Netflix is actually handling their login screen as well. So we're actually minifying Netflix and doing exactly the same thing, right? So that's what we're doing with this huge image. But this is an optimized version because we are using a Next.js image component, right? And also we are giving a negative Z index to make sure that it sits behind our text. So whatever text we are writing, it actually sits on top of our image. The next thing we're going to have an image, and this is going to be a logo image. I'm quickly just going to get this. And let's make this again like this, and let's just quickly get this logo image. As soon as I save this, we have our beautiful SVG logo image, right? And some styling for this image, we are saying position absolute, left and top of 4 to give some spacing. If I actually remove this, you all will see that it's touching the corners, but we don't want to do that, so we're saying left and top of 4, cursor or pointer, so it looks like a link, right? And we are also saying object contain to maintain the ratio, and on a bigger breakpoint, we're just giving more left and top, right? Now, the next thing we're going to do immediately is we want to have a form, right? Because this is going to be a login page, right? So we're going to have a form, right? And inside of a form, we're going to have an H1 first of all, which is going to say sign in, right? And then we're going to have we're going to be having a container div, right? And inside of this container div, we're going to be having 2 labels. So I'm just going to use emmet 2 labels, and I'm going to remove this HTML4, right? And again, I like to use, as I told you guys, I like to use label tags, semantic HTML. So we're going to have 2 labels. The first label is going to have an input field, and it's going to be of type email, right? So we're going to change this type to email, right? That's what I'm doing. The placeholder is going to be email. So as soon as I save this, we can see it's appearing, but it's actually because our image, right, it is actually absolute. So again, it's not taking into account the height of the image, and it's starting from top here. So we need to make sure we give some styling to our form so that doesn't happen. So for our form, what I'm going to do is give a class name, and we're going to say relative, and we can say margin top of 24 to make sure that it doesn't touch there. We also can say space y of 8. We can make it rounded, and we can also say background black and opacity of 75, right? And we can also say padding top and bottom of 10. We also want to say padding left and right of 6, and on medium breakpoint we don't want to give any margin top, so I'm just going to say margin top of 0. Also on medium breakpoint, we don't want to give any sort of max width. We do want to give max width of medium, on a larger screen. And we also want to make sure on a medium breakpoint we have a padding left and right of 14. So that's what we are doing for our form. Then we have an H1, and then we have this div. We're going to make this div space y of 4, spacing between the children, because there are 2 labels, which means both of these labels, the second one, which is going to be for the password, is going to be like this. So it's going to have an input field as well. So I'm just going to quickly get this input field, and this is going to be for password. And the reason you have to give the type is so that it actually hides the password when you're actually typing into the input field. And you can see because of the type, password's actually hiding that right now. So we have sign in, and we have email, and we have password, right? Now what else do we want to do is we want to give some class names to our input fields here. And what we want to do for the class names is we want to say input here. So this is again a custom class name which I'm giving here. And for our password also, we're going to say class name of input. Now again, of course, this is a custom class name, so it means we have to create this inside of our global CSS. So I'm just going to quickly navigate to global CSS, and let me just quickly actually navigate to my global CSS on my other screen as well, so I can see what styles I've given to the, and first thing we're going to do is use the class name which we have given, our custom class name, which is the input, and we're going to be applying some styling here. So we're going to say apply. First thing I'm going to say, we're going to say width of full, so it takes the full width, right? Next thing we're going to say is rounded, so it's going to be rounded, it's going to be a little bit have rounding corners, as you can see. So it's rounded, it's going to have a background of 333, it's going to have a background of 333. It's also going to have a padding left and right of 5. It's going to have a padding top bottom of 3.5, so some spacing from top and bottom, right? And the placeholder, now in Tailwind, this is something really cool. What you can do is you can just target placeholder, and you can actually change the colors of placeholder like this. You can just say placeholder, and the color I want to apply is a custom color value of E5, E5, E5. Oh, actually not E5, sorry, it's actually gray, custom, but it's a custom gray color. So placeholder gray, which means if I actually remove this, so these are my placeholders, and you can see they have turned gray right now. So placeholder gray, and I don't want this annoying outline. So whenever I actually click any of the input, you see this blue outline, and I want to remove that. So to make sure that's gone, we just say outline none, and now you can see that annoying outline is actually gone. So outline none, and on focus, we also want to change the background to a different color value, which is 454545 actually, and you don't have a P here. So, and now if I actually focus on any of these input fields, you can see the background color is actually changing. So that's what we want to do, and this is it for our input styling. So we're done our input with our input styles. Now we can go back and we can actually continue working on our inputs. So we have an email and we have a password, and for some reason it's not giving spacing for our labels. The reason why is because our labels aren't actually inline block elements. So we need to make sure they're actually inline blocks, both of them. So we have to say they're inline blocks, and as soon as I do that, what happens is actually the inline block, it means it's not taking the full width. So I need to now make sure that they actually take the full width. So I need to say width of full, and as soon as I do that, our spacing is working now. So we can see our spacings are working, because by default label tags aren't inline block. They aren't inline block. So we have to make sure that we actually make them inline block. So now we can see our spacings working. Our input fields are done. The next thing we want to do is outside this div, we're gonna have a button, of course, to make sure to tell the user to sign in, right? And again, the beautiful thing about Tailwind is actually removes all the default styling, right? So we're actually not seeing any default styling. So, and the button and the the button and the H1 looks exactly the same, even though they're not. So the thing is that Tailwind actually removes every styling from everything, so you don't get those ugly styling, as you get in the CSS. So for the button, we're gonna style this button. We're gonna say button's gonna have a width of full. It's gonna have a width of full. It's gonna have a rounded corner, and it's gonna have a background, and the background is gonna be E50914, and this is actually the red background Netflix for the Netflix buttons. This is actually Netflix branding color. You can think of this is a Netflix red, actual red brand color. So as soon as I do that, we can see the buttons change. Beautiful. The next thing we want to do is we want to have a div for sign up, right? Because the user can be a new user, right? So you might have to tell the user to sign up, and here we're gonna have to say new to Netflix if the user is new to Netflix, and then we have another button here, and this button is just gonna say sign up right now, right? And again, for this button, we're gonna have some styling. We're gonna say cursor pointer. Since it's a button, so it's already cursor pointer, you don't have to say that. So text white, and you also want to say on hover, I want an underline basically. So when I hover over this sign up now, you can see and hover underline here. So this is done. This is really beautiful. And one thing we forgot to actually style is our h1 here. So for our h1, we're gonna say class name of text of 4xl. So we're gonna say my bad, sorry, text of 4xl to make it bigger, and we're also gonna say font of semi-bold. And that's all we have to say for our h1 to make it look much nicer. So we have our sign in, we have our email, we have our password, and we have our button. And right now, as you guys can see, whenever I actually click on the button, it actually refreshes the page, and we don't want to actually do that, right? And also for the button, and we're going to prevent that, and I'm going to show you how we can do that. So we're going to say submit button type, because the button type is going to be submit because we have a form, right? So you want that nice enter functionality. So whenever the user actually comes to password and then presses enter, it's going to actually log in. And next thing we're going to have, now we're going to have our function, our login function basically in the place, right? We're going to have our login. And one more thing I don't actually like it is there's not so spacing. So this is, I'm going to do just give one spacing between them. So we actually, and what we want to also actually do is for this container there, actually we want it to be gray. We don't want it to be white. So we're going to just say text gray. So as soon as I do that, I mean, I want the link to be white, but this to be gray. So we can actually do that, which is really nice. The next thing, let me see if we are actually done with the stylings. So we're actually done with our styling now. Now the next thing we want to actually do is we want to have our function, right? So when the user actually clicks on the button, the user actually logs in, right? That's what we want to create the next thing. So what we can actually do is we can have an on click here, and we can actually, so we need a piece of state first of all, because we want to check if the user wants to actually log in or if the user wants to actually sign up, right? So first thing we want is we want to have a piece of state called login, set login, and you also want to say use state, right, which is a React hook, and by default it's going to be false, right? Because we don't know what the user wants, right? But we need to track this. We need to track that if the user actually wants to log in or if the user wants to actually sign up, right? We need to make sure to track this this state, and we're gonna do this really nicely. But before continuing with this, what we should actually do is let's actually install our React hook forms, and you can see on a bigger screen it actually looks like this. Has a beautiful so we can also see the background color, and the reason why it's only on a bigger screen is because we are saying the background of the form should be black/75. So actually remove this, you can see the background's gone, but if I put this back, it's back again. But on a smaller screen, we are not actually doing that. So on a smaller screen, we are just making the background to be black for the entire container. So that's what's happening on a smaller screen. But yeah, that's what we are actually doing on a bigger screen, right? So it's really nice. It's what we are doing. It's completely responsive, as you can see. So what we want to do is we want to navigate to React hook forms, right? And this is a really good library for React validation, and you can just watch the demos. So if you go, this is the kind of demo you can submit, and you will see they will give you error handling. So this is a really popular library. This gives you it has a lot of benefits and gives you a lot of nice features, and it supports TypeScript as well. So anything which actually has TypeScript, I just fell in love with it, you know. So it supports TypeScript, as you can see, you know. So it's a really good library, and it's used in production. So it's really nice. We're going to be using this library. So first thing we want to do is get started, actually install React hook form inside of our application. So just go back, open our second terminal, actually install this. And what we want to do in the beginning is we want to have some, so this library actually gives us these beautiful hooks, right? So we're going to be using these hooks, right? So what we actually can do here is you can actually copy these two, and you can actually you know, paste this on top here, okay? Because you're going to be using this, so we can copy this. Now use form is of course a hook, as we can auto import from React hook form. Again, the inputs is something we have to create. There are actually going to be interfaces. So we're going to say interface, and it's going to be inputs, And what do I mean by inputs is, again, because a TypeScript, you need to define types, right? So the email and the password needs to have types. So email and password are both going to be strings, right? So they're both going to be strings, and as soon as I do that, the error is gone here, right? So we are actually saying use the hook, but we are also providing the types here, right? Which is the email and the password types, right? Submit handler is again going to be from React hook form. Again, it's a type, and this type is for the form type on submit type, which is going to be a function, right? Now what we can actually do here is on our form. So what we can do, if we go back to documentation, you can see on the form, handle submit will validate your inputs before invoking on submit, right? So this is what we can do on our form here, right? So we can go to our form, right? You can just quickly paste this and handle submit, and it's going to invoke the on submit function, but it's only going to invoke that function before after validating, I mean, your inputs. First, it's going to actually validate, and how it's actually going to do that is by just registering something called this on our input fields. So if we actually do this on our input fields, if I go to my input field here, and if I just do this, instead of example, this is going to be email. And the reason I'm actually getting these two is because I provided the types here for email and password. That is why I'm getting this very nice IntelliSense, which is telling me email or password. So this is going to be for email. So I'm going to register this as an email like this, right? And I'm also going to put a comma, and we can send in something called options here. And I want to send in required to true, right? Because I want my email to be true, right? I want the user to actually enter the email, because you cannot log in without entering the email and password. So email is actually a required field. And then we can copy this and actually paste this for the password, because both of them are going to be required, right? And in this scenario, it's going to be password. So we're going to register this as a password, right? So we have password, we have an email, and now we have registered that. Now let's actually try to submit the form, right? Let's actually try to submit the form, because we have our on submit here. So let's actually go back to the app, and let's actually try what happens when you submit the form. So I have my email here, right? So if I try to actually submit, what should happen is this function should run, and this function should console log the data, whatever data we get. So let's actually try to log in right now. And we get an object immediately. We get an object here, and we can see the line number 21. So this means this is correct. So if I try to open this, here we go, guys. This actually works. It works in the first go, right? So because we have done everything correctly and with TypeScript, by providing the correct types, this is actually working now, right? And this is going to always prevent us from getting into weird sort of errors. We don't need form state, and we do need form state. Sorry, we don't need watch, by the way. So watch is another thing, and you can read more about these. You can read more about these, these things here. The use form hook. It gives us all these different things on their website. So their website documentation is really good. So what happened here is actually we're seeing this object now. If I actually change this to, let's say, something else, and the password is something else, and if I actually log in again, I can again see my email and password here. So this is working. Now, one thing we want to do is we want to have error handling, right? So what if I don't actually type in anything? So if I actually don't type in anything, I'm actually not getting any object, because it's not invoking the onSubmit function, but we need to get some sort of error handling, right? And the way we actually do that is this actually gives us something called errors. And where do we get these errors? Is from the form state, right? This actually gives us an object called errors. And what we can do is we can copy this, right? And just like inside of our input, after the input, we can do something like this. And we can say errors dot, and we can see if I do dot, I get email and password. So I'm going to say email, and I'm going to just render like a simple p tag. Instead of a span, I'm just going to render a simple p tag. And the p tag is actually going to say, please enter a valid email. And let's actually get this, because I've already done this. So, and this is a styled, I've actually styled this. So I'll quickly get this. And just after the input, and you can have it anywhere. It's not necessary that you have this after the input. But I just decided, because Netflix has it after the input field. So this is the correct place to put it. And as soon as I actually save that, look at this, it's actually working right now. And now I'll do the same thing for the password. So let's just quickly get it for the password as well. And this is how simple validation is with React Hook Forms. So if I actually save this again, we can see we get for both your password must contain between, and you can do a lot of things. You can do like so you can do password, strong password checks. You can do a lot of different things. If you go read their documentation, they will tell a lot of things. So there are a lot of things you can do. You can basically what do you call, so what do you do for passwords and stuff? I forgot the term, but you can actually do a lot of sorts of things for password testing and stuff. For strong password testing and stuff. So if I actually enter my email now, and if I don't enter my password, it's not going to submit, as you can see. So right now it needs to, the error handling is actually working for us. So we have successfully hooked our React Hook Forms, right? With this, right? We have successfully hooked the React Hook Forms part. Now what we need to work on next is actually our login function, right? So when I actually click on login, I want the user to actually log in, and if the user does not click on login, if he clicks on sign up, we want the user to actually sign up. Now how are we actually going to do that? Now instead of course console log the data, we want to do something more useful, right? So, and it's going to be an asynchronous function, right? And what we are going to be doing is we're going to be actually checking if the user, if it's actually login, if login is true, which means if the user actually clicked on the login, on the login button, and if he actually clicked on the login the sign in button, which is here, right? What we can do is we can say on click, right? We can just basically say so we can basically say set login to be true, right? And the reason we want to actually do this is because if the user clicks on sign in, which means the user wants to actually sign in, right? And if the user actually clicks on sign up, what we can do is actually set login to false, right? So depending on where the user actually clicks, we can actually track that in a piece of state, right? And then we're going to actually check this here, that if our login is actually true, and if that's the case, we want to actually sign in. And we haven't yet created this function, but this function is going to accept two things, and you can see data contains, and we can directly destructure the data here by just saying email and password, and we can just pass in email and password like this, right? And again, sign in is a function which is going to be inside of our custom hook, which we'll be creating after this. And if I do else, I'm going to say await sign up, right? Which means if the login is false, the user probably clicked on the sign up button, right? So he needs to sign up. So we are going to say sign up and just send in the email and password. And again, these two functions we're going to get out from our custom hook, which we're going to be creating now. So if this portion is clear, and I tried to do my best to explain in as easy as possible, but if you're stuck, or if this is going on top of your head, that what's actually going on here, just don't worry, just watch the video again. Just rewind back, just watch it again, and you're gonna, trust me, pattern recognition, and you're gonna understand it. So all we are actually doing is we are having a form, right? We're submitting some inputs, and we are not using any use states or use refs as we have done before in our previous builds. We have used use refs and use states to track what the user actually types. We're using instead something called a register, and this is a spread operator. If you guys know, this is a spread operator, and we're using this register pattern, which the React Hook Form library actually gives us. And this is how we are actually submitting only if the conditions are true, right? If it's not true, we are not actually submitting. So, and actually working like a login thing. So that's what we are actually essentially doing. And then we have a function, so we can actually log in the user or sign up the user depending on that. That's all we are doing if you break it down. So now let's create our first custom hook inside of the application. It's going to be the most powerful hook in this build. It's the most powerful hook, and we're going to be having 3 custom hooks, by the way, which I'm going to be showing. So I'm going to create a new folder just for a good folder structure. So we have components, we have constants, we have pages, we have styles, we have utils. Now we have hooks, right? Now inside of our hooks, I'm going to be creating use auth our custom hook.tsx, right? And the way you actually create custom hooks is they're just like any normal functional component, right? And you don't need to change the name. You can keep this name exactly like that, right? And the way we actually do this, we have a piece of state, right? And this custom hook is, trust me, is going to be really a really powerful hook. So what we can do is we have this hook, and usually the way we create custom hooks is there's a piece of state, let's say a user, set user or something, and then what happens is that this use state, right, which we import from React, let's say, and what we basically do in the end is we just return that return the user in the end after doing something with the set user, you know. So setting the user and returning this is how we usually create custom hooks. So instead of returning JSX like how we normally do in our functional components, we return something called JSX like this, right? So instead of doing this, all we do is we return the variable, our state basically. And this is how we create custom hooks. This is like a pattern of creating custom hooks. But in this scenario, what we're going to be returning is actually it's going to be our auth context of provider, which is going to wrap our application, our whole application. So we have the access to the authentication state, to all these things, entire our whole application. So this is going to be really powerful, yeah. So first thing what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing bunch of imports, right? So I'm just going to quickly go and I'm going to do a bunch of imports for our custom hook. So let's open our custom hook, and we're going to be doing some bunch of imports. I'm just going to quickly import these things, and let's go back to our app and let's import these things. And we're already importing use state, so we are importing some functions, right? And these are again functions from Firebase, modular functions, you know, on auth state change, user, and this is just the type of user, some auth, some use router stuff, and some create context, use context, use memo, and use memo is another hook. It works like use effect, but it actually memorizes your value. And of course, I don't want to be teaching hooks in this build, in this video, but just so you know that use memo is a hook, kind of works similar to use effect, but it only memorizes the value when one of the dependencies is changed. Only one of the dependencies is changed, so it only runs that. So you're going to be using a use memo hook. And if you don't know about these hooks, just I'd suggest just go ahead and type and learn, you know, these hooks. A really good website for learning hooks would be usehooks.com. So this is a really sick website for learning all types of hooks, a really sick website. So you can use this website to actually learn about hooks. But yeah, so to get started, what we can do is first we can actually have some interfaces, you know, and we're going to create some interfaces. So first interface we're going to be creating is, or actually before even creating interfaces, let's actually create our functions, right? Let's actually create our functions. So first, let's actually create our sign up function. So we're going to be having a sign up function, and it's going to be an asynchronous function again. It's going to be async await, and it's going to again accept two things. Remember, it's going to accept email and it's going to accept password, right? So email and password both as string, right? And what we want to basically do here is we're going to have a piece of state, and we're going to have a piece of state called loading, okay? And we're also going to have set loading, okay? And this is again really useful because the hook we are actually creating, we are actually having loading indicators and everything inside of this one custom hook. So we are only managing from this hook itself, so we don't have to create these states separately elsewhere, which is really powerful, by the way. So first thing we're going to do is we want to set the loading to true, because of course it's going to sign up the user, right? So we want to set the loading to true. Next thing we want to do is we want to say await, right? And now we're going to be using this function called create user, which we have imported from Firebase, right? And if I actually do this, you can see actually accepts an auth, right? The auth is something which we are importing from Firebase. If I go to our Firebase file, we are importing this, exporting the auth get auth, which is the function. It returns the auth instance associated with the provided project, so it returns is that authentication. So, and the second thing, if I do, it actually accepts an email and actually a string. So what we're going to do is actually just give it the email and the password, right? That's what we're going to do. And now the error is gone. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to say dot then, right? Of course, you can store this inside of a variable and do it that way, but I like to kind of do it like this. Or you can use a try catch as well. But I like to do it like this. And then we're going to have a user credential, right? And this user credential, basically, what we're going to do with this credential is first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually set our user, right? And how are we going to set our user? We need to have another piece of state called user, right? Set user, and we're going to say use state, okay? And we're going to provide a type here. The reason we want to provide a type is because this is going to be a Firebase user, and this is what the Firebase type actually gives us. They give us a user account. This is the type of the user, and it can be null as well. So what we can do is we can say an or null, and by default it's going to be null, right? Because we're going to be initializing this. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to say set the user to the user credential, and as soon as I say dot, we can get the user. So we want to say dot user here, and if I actually don't do this, you will see that this will actually error out. If I don't give the type, you can see that this is actually erroring out, and it's saying argument of type user is not assignable to parameter of set state action. This is the reason we need that user type from Firebase, because if we have the type, then it's not going to error out. Because TypeScript, we need to always provide types like this. And the way I actually find these types is by just thinking, right? So because I'm setting a user, right, and I just think like it's going to be a Firebase user, right? So what makes sense is Firebase should have a type for this user. And what I actually do is I actually go here, and if I didn't have the user, for example, what I do is I try to type here, and you can see we can get all the different types here: user credential, user metadata, and stuff. And we just needed the user, right? So I just took the user and just put in here. So this is how I try to find types like this when we are using additional libraries, Next thing we want to do after setting our user is we're going to use our router. And the way we are going to be using our router is first we need to say const our router or router. We're going to say use router, and this is going to be from Next.js. Of course, it's a Next.js router. The next thing we want to do is we're going to say we want to push, right? We want to push the user to the home page, right? Because remember, we're going to be on actually our login screen, right? We're not going to be on the home screen. When the user is actually logging in, this is our login screen. So we want to make sure that after the user is actually logged in, we push the user to a login page, right? And then we want to also do set the loading to false in the end. And after we actually successfully do these steps, what we can actually do is after we do these steps is here, we can actually catch for any errors. We can say if there is any error, so error. If there's any sort of error, we want to just alert the user. And again, here you can have error states if you want to. Like you can create a piece of variable, just like loading an error variable, and then you can export that, and then you can actually create a beautiful UI. If the user enters something, if anything goes wrong, you can create a UI for that. But in this, just to keep it simple, I just did an alert here. But you can actually do that as well. So I'm just going to say error.message. And finally, there's another one which we have, which is going to be finally, if let's say after both of these conditions, like if there's an error of if this is successful, finally what we want to do is we want to make sure the loading actually goes back to false, right? So we want to make sure we actually do that, right? So we're going to say finally to actually do that. And you can see attaches a callback that is invoked when the promise is settled. So it doesn't matter if it's fulfilled or rejected. It is always going to happen. Finally, it means it's always going to run. So we're going to do this. And the next thing, we have our create user with email and password, right? So we have this. Next thing we're going to create is our sign in function. So just like sign up, sign in is actually going to be the same. Just like so, I'm just going to copy this. Again, it's going to be called sign in, right? And it's going to accept the email and the password. And instead of create user, we're going to be using sign in with email and password, which is again a Firebase function. It accepts three things: the authentication instance, the email, and the password. So we're going to send these three things. And then we are actually going to do the exact same thing as we did with the sign up, right? Now we have sign up, we have sign in, we're going to be having a logout, right? Of course, because user is logged in, user needs to log out, right? So we're going to have a logout function. A logout is just going to say a synchronous function again. We are also going to say, now here again, the first thing we want to make sure this loading is true. And now we want to use the sign out function from Firebase, and this only accepts the auth instance. So we're just going to send the auth instance, and then remember it gives us returns back a promise, right? Which means you have to do .then, right? And this is just a simple callback, right? And what we can do here is we can set the user back to null again if this is successful, right? Because we want to remove the user, right? So we're going to set the user to null, and we're going to catch for any errors if there are, and we're also going to say .finally, and we are going to say set our loading to false. So this is our logout function, which I just created. The next thing we want to actually do, right? The next thing we actually want to do is we want to have a state, right? Basically a state, right? Which when we want to return this, is going to be like auth context, right? It's going to be auth context. And it's going to say .provider, and of course the auth context is actually not defined right now, but what we are going to be doing is we're going to have something called auth context .provider, and what we actually want to do here is this auth context it will be initialized at the top of the application, and want to return this provider, and inside of this, right, we're going to return something called the children, right? Which of course we don't have it right now, yet. But what I'm actually trying to do here is this is going to be a wrapper. The reason it's erroring out right now because I don't have the auth context, right? So what I'm going to do is outside our, and we can see this is our export. This is our function called export, and the function is actually called const, and functions actually called a bit different. It's called auth provider. So make sure you change the function name. So I've changed the function name to auth provider, and what I've actually done here is instead of default exporting here, we're not actually doing that, and export const auth provider. What I'm actually doing here is I'm actually saying, because it's an arrow function, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say like this, and it's going to accept the children here, right? It's going to accept the children, but again we are using TypeScript, so it's actually saying that it has any type, so we need to provide the type now. Now to provide type, you're going to say auth provider props, right? And this can be any name. Again, I just named it as auth provider props, right? And then we're going to have an interface with auth provider props, and the children is gonna have a type of React .react node, something called React.react node. And again, if you don't understand what I'm doing here, this is just the type for the children. So children are gonna, and as soon as I do that, we can see the children. This is not erroring out anymore, right? The children. If I actually try to do this, we can see this. The children is not erroring out anymore. So the reason, what I actually basically did here, the type for the children is gonna be the React.react node type, which means the children are gonna be like these are gonna be the children, right? So remember, the auth provider is gonna be a wrapper entire our whole application. It's gonna be wrap our whole application, right? And those in that application, all of these things are called children, like everything. And what type of type will they have? They'll have the React.react node, and this is just the type, by the way. Okay, that's a React child type. This is how you do it. And the way I actually figured this out is I Stack Overflowed. Yeah, so that's how I figured it out. I just figured it out by Stack Overflowing what's the type for children, in TypeScript, and this is what I found. So this is how I did it, guys. The next thing we want to do is we want to also have an we want to say const auth context. Remember, we have auth context, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use const auth context, and I'm going to actually create context, right? And when we are creating context, you have to provide a default value, right? So the default value which you're going to be providing is going to be an interface of auth of type IAuth, right? And this is going to be, again, this interface you have to create. So what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to quickly get this interface from here and then explain what I'm actually doing, right? And this is going to be the interface. Now again, the reason why we're providing the interface here, right? The reason we are actually, and this is not going to be like this, my bad, it's going to be a type, right? So it's going to be IAuth like this, right? IAuth like this, yeah. And the reason why we actually did this is so we get this IntelliSense, you know. So that's provided the type, you know, and now we can see we get these really nice IntelliSense here. The first thing we want to do is by default the user is actually going to be null, right? So we're going to say user is null. The second one is going to be sign up. So the sign up is just going to be an asynchronous function, right? So we're just going to say asynchronous function, and it's going to return back an object, right? And we can do the same for sign in, right? It's going to be an asynchronous function, and what it's going to do, it's going to return back an object, right? And the same thing you can actually do for the logout. Logout is again an asynchronous function, right? Again, it's erroring out because there are two more, error and loading. So error by default is going to be null, right? And loading is actually going to be false by default. And as soon as I complete this doesn't error out anymore. And what I basically did is I provided types so we get our nice IntelliSense. And these are just types, right? The user is going to be of type user or null. The sign up is going to be of type, it's going to accept email and password, and it's going to just return us a promise. Sign in is just going to accept email and passwords, return us a promise. The login is just going to return us a promise. The error is going to be type of string or null, and loading is of type boolean, right? So if it makes sense, right? And here I'm just giving the auth context, creating my context, right? And if you want to learn more about this, again, just search on Google, right? But this is essentially what we're doing. We're creating our context, right? So we can actually wrap our whole application within this context, which we are going to be doing. And it's actually called the higher order component, right? If you know about it, it's called an HOC, which wraps your entire app, you know. And that's all we're doing inside of create context, right? The next thing we want to do is if we actually go here, it's actually still giving us that error, right? So now first thing we want to do is we actually want to make sure we're actually doing it like this, right? And we're also going to be having something called initial loading, and here at the bottom of this this page we're also going to be exporting default function use auth actually, and what we're going to be doing is export default function, and we're going to be returning use context, right? Use context, because we're going to be using this context, and we're going to be putting auth context here. So this is what we need to do, okay? Auth context here, and this auth context is still erroring out. The reason is still erroring out. So if I actually comment this, this is still erroring out, right? Because it is actually missing in type children, right? So it's actually telling this is missing, and what is actually missing is actually the value, right? So we need to provide the value, and what I actually mean by the value is all these things, right? All these things, the user, the loading, so we can actually use them, right? So we need to provide these values inside of our provider. That's what's missing here. So to provide these values, what we can either do something like provide this whole value as a separate on its own, like just provide user, just provide some values like user and stuff like this, or we can actually, we can provide values like this, or to make it more performant, we're going to be using something called use memo now, and that's going to be a hook, right? So instead of doing it like this way, what we want to do is just above here we're going to have something called memoid value, and I learned this from Sunny Sanga's video, by the way. I think it was the Spotify build which he did. So I learned this use memo hook from him basically, and if you want to learn, you can just watch that video, or maybe like learn from that website I told you. So this hook, what it actually does is actually going to make it more performant, and you can see like if it's going to only recompute the value when one of these dependencies is changed, rather than, so it's only recomputed if one of these is changed, right? Whereas if we send the value without this, it's going to recompute every single time, which is again less performant. And when you're using this hook, is of course it's going to be more performant. So you want to use this hook, and all we want to do is we're going to say this is actually going to return, okay, and this is going to return us a user, okay. And what I'm actually trying to do here is I'm just using the hook called use memo, right? I'm using the hook called use memo, and what I'm actually doing is I'm just returning an object, right? I'm returning an object, and this object is basically going to contain the user, is going to contain the sign up, it's actually going to contain the sign in, right? And it's going to also contain the error, and it's also going to contain the loading, and it's going to contain the log out, okay. It's going to contain all these things, right? And what we're going to be doing is going to have a dependency, right, just like use effect, and this dependency is going to be depending on user, loading, and error, these three things, right? And we don't actually have error, so we can actually remove the error, right? We don't need error, so we can remove the error, but we can actually have, as I told you before, we can have error state as well. So what we are actually doing here is we have all these values, and again, use memo hook, what's going to happen, it's only going to change, it's only going to recompute, it's only going to run, and it's kind of similar to use effect, right? But it's only going to recompute when either one of these dependencies is changed, okay, which means either user or either the loading, right? So then only it's going to recompute back, which is a much efficient way of doing stuff, right? So I do memory value, this is what's going to happen. And right now it's actually giving me an error because it's telling me property error is actually missing. The reason actually telling me that is because I have an error state here in my types, right? So let's just create an error state for now. Let's just create it. If anyone wants to ever use this, they can create a UI for this, and we can export the error. So we can say error, right? And we can say set error, right? And we can say use state, and by default, of course, the error is going to be null, right? So we have error, and now it's because it's missing, so we just need to provide error here, right? And as soon as I actually do that, now it looks really clean. And now we are actually so much type proof, right? We have done this and there are no errors, and this is all done in TypeScript. So really, really robust code, right? Really, really robust code. Everything's done in TypeScript and there's no error whatsoever. There's one more thing which is actually missing, which is gonna be our use effect on top here. And this use effect is gonna be for our on auth state change, just to make sure to persist every time, because it's not going to persist when the user is actually logged in, and when we refresh, it's going to take us back to the login. So to make sure it actually persists, what we need to do is we need to add this use effect, right? So I'm quickly going to copy it and just going to quickly add this. And this is going to have, so we missed one thing actually, and the one thing we missed is actually initial loading. And what the initial loading is going to do, and it's not the same as loading. Initial loading is a bit different, and what's actually going to do is by default it's actually going to be true by default instead of false. So what initial loading is going to do is actually going to block the UI, right? And we can do it inside of our children. So when we are actually rendering the children, think about it. So we're going to be loading this, right? We're going to be loading when the user is actually logging in, the loading is going to be true, right? So to block the UI, what we can actually do is you can say something like, if the initial loading, right, if there is no initial loading, then only I want to show the children. This means it's going to actually block the whole UI, and it's only going to show it when the initial loading is actually not true, right? Then only it's going to show this. And what we can do here is every time when we are persisting, we're actually making this set initial loading true. So what we are actually doing here, and this is a very clean way of writing use effects, by the way, because we are not using returns. So if you know that when you use useFX, you use something like this, and then you'd have to return, then you have to write a cleanup function. This is a very shorter way of writing this without the return and the cleanup function. So a very nice way of writing useFX. So what we are doing here is actually, I'm just checking on-auth state change, and it accepts two things. The first is the auth instance. The second is actually the user, right? Actually gives us back the user, sorry. It accepts the auth instance and actually gives us back the user. Now, we just check if there is a user. And if the user is already there, we set the user back again. So we persist the state, and we set the loading to false. And if there is no user, we set the user to null, and we set the loading to be true, and we actually push to the login page, right? This is really game changing. Why? Because what's gonna happen is when we actually click on logout, this is gonna persist, and it's gonna check the user, right? Because every time the auth state changes, and now there will be no user, so it's actually gonna push to the login page, and it's gonna also make the loading to be true. And then only after these things complete, we want to make sure to set the initial loading to false, so it actually blocks the UI and it doesn't show us anything which doesn't need to be shown, right? So this was the final thing we had to do, okay? And I can add comments for anyone who doesn't understand. So why we are actually persisting the user here. So by using the use effect, use on-auth state change, we are actually persisting the user, and this is just a sign up, sign in, and just the memorized value. That's all we are actually doing here. So yeah, now how do we actually access these values? Now remember, before actually moving on, one more thing we actually didn't do is we didn't wrap inside of, to have access to all of these values, we need to make sure that our entire app is actually wrapped around the provider, right? And the way we are going to be doing that is we can just quickly go to our pages and our app.tsx, which is this here, right? And what we can do here is the way we were actually returning this, if you see exporting default as use auth, right? So that's how we are actually exporting this, right? And we were actually exporting the auth provider. We were exporting the auth provider here. So we can import this auth provider. What we can do here is you can auto import this auth provider, right? And we can copy the component and we can paste it inside of our auth provider. Now this component is actually our whole application actually wrapped inside of the provider, and we don't need to actually send in anything here, okay? And now we save this. Now to make sure that we have access to at any level of the application, we have access to our use auth hook. So, and this is what's basically called an HOC, which is a higher order component. So if you don't know about HOCs, you can read about them, but just by typing higher order components, which wraps entire whole application. And this is what we basically do when you use any external library. So if you watched the previous videos, we always used to use something called next auth package or like any other package, and we always used to wrap our application, right? So this is what happens behind the scenes, guys. So what those libraries actually do, they have these custom hooks, right? So they have already created these hooks, right, for us, so we can actually use these hooks. Now what we did here is we went ahead and created our own custom hook instead of using a library like that. And this hook actually is really, really nice because it works with any other database. If you're using MongoDB, or if you're using like Supabase, or if you're using any SQL alternative or anything, it's gonna work for any single database, this hook, right? And it follows the same architecture, the same pattern, which is the beautiful thing about creating a custom hook like this. It has immense power. Now let's actually use this, because we have created this hook. Let's actually use this inside of our login page. So let me quickly go back to my login page. So let's get back to our login page, and now actually uncomment these functions, and let's actually auto import these functions and sign in. Remember, if we go to our if we have to use these functions, what we have to do is access our use auth hook, and the way we are going to be doing that is we're going to say use auth, right? Because you have a custom hook, and I'm just going to quickly auto import this from /hook/use auth. And now this, if I press control space here, I get all these states, guys. I get my sign in, and this is what happens when you use any external library, like NextAuth or anything. This is what happens, right? You use a hook, it gives us login, sign up, log out, everything. And we just did it customly by ourselves. So we're gonna say sign in and we're gonna say sign up here. Get these two functions and I'm just gonna save it, right? So we have successfully correctly actually done this. So if you have done everything correctly so far, this should work in the first go, right? Because if you have done everything correctly. And before actually doing that, let's actually go back to our home page. And let's also make sure inside of our home page, so we have to make sure of one thing, right? And we have to make sure of our loading. But if we have done everything correctly, this should actually work. So this is our login page, and let's actually test this now. So if I actually try to sign in, and because I don't have any account, and here we go, we see configuration not found, right? Configuration not found. So actually giving us an error called configuration not found. And the reason this is actually giving us this type of error is because inside of our project, we haven't turned the authentication on, right? So we need to make sure we have to go to the authentication tab. We need to click on get started, right? And what we have to do is we need to turn our email or password authentication on basically. And we need to make sure to do that. This is really, if you don't do that, it's gonna give us that error which it was giving us. This is what it means by this error. Now we need to make sure that this is actually enabled. So we enable this, and they have a lot of different options. In some of my builds, I might use passwordless sign-in just to show you all how we can do like magic links and stuff. But what we want to do is we want to enable this and we want to save this. And it should look like this, the next step. It should be enabled. This should be enabled. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to refresh this. Let's see. Okay. And let's try to sign in now and let's see if the error changes. Now, the error is actually changed to user not found, right? Because there is no user no user with this email address. So we need to sign up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on sign up. If I click on sign up, nothing happened. If it worked successfully, it should have actually redirected us back to the home page. So if I try to access my home page, I can access my home page, which means this is working. And let's actually, to make sure that this actually correctly worked, let's go to our authentication. And in the users, we see a user, right? But it did not redirect us correctly, right? From login to the home page. So we need to make sure that we actually do that, right? But this actually worked, right? Now if I actually try to log out, so let's actually try to log out by clicking on the right side here on this icon. So what we can do is, just like in our login, we can use the hook. Just like we can copy this hook and we can actually have this inside of our header on top here. And we can auto import our hook. And instead of sign in, and you can see how powerful this is, right? We can use the same hook all over our application, all over the components, you know, and it's just single instance which we are using, right? So what we want to do is when we click here on this image actually, so instead of this as being a link, we can just say something like on click, and we can say on click is equals to logout. So if I actually click here, boom, so we are redirected back to login, right? Which means if we go to our custom hook, and if I explain what was happening inside of our logout function is we were logging out and we are actually setting the users back to null. And what we were actually doing, so we are not actually redirecting back to home page here, but we have a persisting state, right? We have on auth state change where we are actually keeping track. So what we are actually doing here is we are saying if there is no user, we want you to push back to login, right? So that's what I actually did for us. Now if I try to log back in again, and here we go, we are actually redirected back this time. So we are redirected back to our home page this time. And this is working really cleanly, right? So if I try to refresh, this works really nicely, right? And if I try to log out again, this is working. But one more thing we actually want to do here, right? Inside of our home page, what we want to do is we want to actually, so first thing we want to do is actually get our use auth hook. And we want to make sure we show some kind of loading indicator when it's actually loading in. Because think about it, if it's going to be, so right now because we have a good Wi-Fi, right? And I have a good Wi-Fi, good internet connection, good internet speed. It's actually not much of a difference here. But if someone has a slow speed, there must be a loading, right? And what we want to actually do is access our loading, because remember we exported the loading state, right? So what we can actually do here is we can say if the loading is actually true, right? If the loading is actually true, we can return like something like let's just say loading, for example, you know, loading, for example. And there's not going to be much of a difference here, but it's good if you actually do this, because we don't want the users to just keep waiting, right? So it's, if I actually try to log in right now, it's not much of a difference, as I said, you know. But what happens is this is the part where it actually blocks the UI, right? Actually blocks the UI. So what we are doing is, just to be on the safe side, we want to return null. So if the loading is true, we want to return null. But it's going to be a difference for people with slower connections, you know. So you want to make sure we show some sort of loading if the loading is actually true here. So since we are done now with this part, and our login authentication flow is completely working, and our login is completely working. So now if I actually try to sign out, and let's try to sign up with any different account. Let's try to sign up with, let's say I'm trying to sign up with this account. Let's actually click on sign up, and here we go. We're redirected back to the app. Beautiful. If we click again, we are logged out. If we type a different password, and it's going to say wrong password, as we can see, our validation is working. So if you don't type the email, it's actually telling us to type the correct email. And if I go to our database, and if we check our authentication tab, we should have 2 users now. So we have 2 users now, as we can see. So this is working, right? This is beautifully working. Everything is kind of nice here. So we have our authentication done. Our authentication is working. The next thing you want to basically do now is you want to create the modal functionality, right? Remember we discussed about it yesterday, that we want to make sure to have this modal functionality, and I think that's going to be the last thing for today's build, and then we can work on the Stripe payments for tomorrow. Like we can have a page like this, we can create this UI, and we can also create the UI for our plans, because what we didn't do right now is when the user actually does not have a subscription. Let's say if I'm a new user and I actually sign up, right? And this is already in use. So if I do like something like this, and if I try to sign up, technically we should be seeing this page, right? But we actually see the home page, which shouldn't be the case, because there should be a subscription, right? So that's what we want to connect to Stripe, and that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. But today, let's build this modal functionality. And what I mean by the modal functionality is basically we want to make sure that so when I log into the app here, this is what I'm talking about. So when I actually click on any of the modals, we see these beautiful modal pop-ups, right? So we want to make sure to do that, and we're going to be using Recoil for state management, by the way. So we're going to be using something called Recoil as well. So yeah, let's actually build that since we are done with our login, right? So let's go back to the app, and the first thing we're going to be doing is let's actually install Recoil. And again, Recoil is it's an alternative to Redux basically, and again this is like a much nicer library for smaller projects and stuff. Of course Redux is used in production, but I'd always prefer Recoil because of its simplicity. Like it's extremely simple, and I've used it I've used it in the Twitter one, and I've also used it in another one of my builds. So and it's really powerful. Recoil, it's really powerful, and it's very simple to use it. So I'm going to copy this command again, do the same thing, install Recoil, and we also are going to be using Material UI the newer version of Material UI, which is version 5, right? Version 5.6.1. This is the newer version of Material UI. So we're going to be using the newer Material UI, right? And we're going to be using a modal. So if I search for a modal component, and if I actually, this is what you're going to be using from Material UI, a modal component, right? So it gives us these overlay and these animations, so we don't have to do it ourselves. But yeah, this is what we're going to be doing. So we have installed Recoil. So the first thing we want to do is we want to have the modal, and the modal is going to be sitting here because it's going to be positioned absolute, right? It's going to be positioned like, so when I click on any of these modals, is going to be positioned like this, right? So that's what's going to happen. So what we want to actually do here is we only want to show the model based on a piece of state, right? And that's the reason we are actually using something called Recoil, right? Because think about it, the reason we use state management libraries is because Redux or Recoil is because we want to have the same state in different components. And how are we actually going to do that? Because we can send the state from one component to the other, but what if the components are not related? And even if the components are related, it actually makes us get into a problem of something called prop drilling, which means I'm sending, I have like a bunch of different components inside of each other, and I keep sending my state back to each of these components, and that's actually causes something called prop drilling, which is not a good practice, right? So to basically fix that thing, we use a state management library, and that's where Redux or Recoil comes in. And we're going to be using Recoil to actually do that, right? Now, we're going to have, with Recoil, the way we actually do this is we have a piece of state, just like normally having a piece of state, and it's going to be like, it's going to be const show modal, right? It's going to be like this. And we're going to be saying use Recoil. And you can see we have use Recoil value because we installed Recoil. This is again a hook, just a hook, and what this hook accepts a Recoil value, which we haven't created yet. So of course we need to create our Recoil value. We need to create a value we can send in here, right? A default value basically. We need to make sure, and this actually works the same way as having a piece of state. Let's say we had show modal, right? This is exactly the same as having a piece of state called set show modal. And if I made it use state, right? If I did use state, and if I made this as false, right? So this is actually doing exactly the same thing here, and for some reason set show modal is, we need to put a comma here. So we can see it's actually exactly the same when using, but with Recoil, all we have to do is use their custom hook, their hook called use Recoil value. So what we're going to do here is open our folder, and we're going to create a new folder called atoms. Now again, this is a folder structure, and I told you guys in the beginning I'm going to be teaching a really slick folder structure. So this is our folder structure, right? We're going to have atoms, and I've used Recoil in my previous builds too, so go check them out if you want to learn more about Recoil. So what I'm going to do next thing is we're going to be having an atom here. So if I go back to my finished build, right, if I click here, and we have atoms, right? Now inside of our atoms, we're going to have something called modal atom.typescript, right? Modal atom.typescript, and this file is going to have this bunch of code, and I'm going to explain what this means basically. And this is again in the documentation. So I've gotten, if we go to Recoil, they actually show us how to actually, so first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we wrap our Recoil our whole entire application, which means our app.tsx, inside of Recoil. So we will have to make sure to do that. And the way we actually create atoms, and we can see an atom it represents just a piece of state, and it can be read and written from any component, right? And this is the way you actually basically create an atom, right? And this is just a piece of state, this is just a piece of state. So we're going to be having two different pieces of state, one of them for the modal and the other one for the movie, right? And we're going to be having a state for our movies, because when we click on any of the modals, we want to make sure to actually save the movie to our store, to our Recoil store. We need to make sure to actually do that. And additionally, what I actually did here is I provided the types, and movie is going to be of type movie, or document data is again, it's because from Firebase, or it can be null, right? So it can be either of these three. And then we have a modal state, which by default is actually going to be false. Now here, what we want to basically do is we want to pass the modal state, right? And the modal state we are going to auto import from atom/modal atom, right? Because we created that state. So we have our show modal, and this modal is actually only going to be shown, and this is going to be a nice component. So we're going to say modal, right? And we haven't created this component, and it's only going to be shown based on this state, right? Because we only want to show the modal if our show modal is actually true. Now let's actually create this modal component. So we're going to go into our components directory, create a new file called modal.tsx, right? And it's rfce Again, this is gonna be a modal component basically, right? And now we can just auto import this modal from the modal. So now let's create the modal component. So we can go inside of modal, and the first thing you want to do is, because you're going to be using Material UI, right? So we need to be able to install Material UI first, right? So just like we install Recoil, we want to install Material UI. And what I'm going to do is we can go to get started again. Whenever we want to install something, you can just go to get started here, and it actually gives us these 3 installs. We can just install these 3 things here, and these 3 are, we need to install them. And then they're also saying that it's using emotion and as a styling, and if you want to use style component, but that's only for style components, so you're not going to be using style components. Then a bunch of other stuff. So you want to install these 3 packages. So again, on my second terminal, I'm just going to paste this command. It's going to install these 3 packages for me. Next thing you want to do is going to go back to our model, and we want to choose our model, like which type of model do we want to use, right? We're just going to be using this basic model, component. And what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be changing this div here to Material UI model, and this is going to be imported from Material UI basically. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to import this, and since it's a default import, so I'm going to say Material UI model from @Material UI, and it's going to be /model. So you can see it gives us all these different components. We can get backdrop, navigation, button, but we're interested in the modal component, so I'm just going to say modal here, right? And right now it's giving us an error, because if we look at here, it's actually telling us that it expects some children inside of the model. And what this basically means is expects a fragment basically. And the way I actually figured out is that if you go back here and if you actually copy this exact one, you can see this has a box, right? And then this box actually contains the children. So what I did to fix this is I just had a fragment, and then I just had modal here, and now it's actually working. Now it's actually giving us another error, and it's actually giving us that it actually expects some props, which we are not actually sending, and those props are open, and we need to also send in something called on close, and we need to also send in open and on close are 2 props we need to send in. So we need to determine when the modal is actually open. So we need to say open will be true based on show modal, which is our state which we created. So I'll just copy it from the index page, and we can just quickly just paste it here. Now here we need to import 2 things, modal state and use recoil value. So you want to make sure that the modal is only open based on the show modal state, right? And you want to make sure to close the modal. And now we're going to create a function here called handle close. And the reason I'm actually creating a function is because we're also going to close the modal. So if I actually click on here, we're also going to close the modal by clicking here on this button. So we can close the modal like this as well, and we can also close the modal by clicking on the overlay. So this is why I'm creating a separate function. And we can see the error is giving this component must be used inside a recoil root. Now this is actually erroring it out, right? Because we are not actually wrapping our app inside of the recoil root, which we want to do. So first let's create this this function quickly. Let's say handle close, and what's gonna happen in this function is just gonna set the show modal state to actually false. And instead of doing like this, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna use state like this, and we're also gonna say set show modal, and instead of using use recoil value, we can just use recoil state. And the difference between use recoil state and use recoil value is that recoil state returns a tuple, whereas the use recoil value actually just returns the value itself. So if you want to use just the value, we don't have to use state, and if you want to do both things, we can just use the use recoil state. So now here I'm just going to say set show modal to false, right? So the modal actually closes. The next thing, let's actually wrap our application with the recoil root. So all we have to do is we just have to say recoil, And let me actually double verify, and let me quickly check if I'm doing this correctly. So if I go to my app.tsx, all we have to do is we have to wrap it inside of a recoil root component. So all these three things inside of a recoil root, and recoil root is imported from recoil, right? And as soon as I save this, we can see this, and this is actually a higher order component. So if I say higher, this is called a higher order component, this auth provider, okay? And recoil root is also a higher order component. So both of these are actually higher order components, right? Which we are wrapping inside of our entire application. So now this actually works, but let's actually see if our modal is actually working. So the way we're going to be triggering the modal is by clicking, so whenever the user actually clicks on this button, or whenever the user actually clicks on any of these thumbnails, right? And that way we are going to be triggering the modal. So let's actually go back to our modal now, because we need to create some stuff here, and let's actually keep the modal text inside. So now what we can actually do is by clicking on this more info, so let's actually go to our banner, right? And where we actually have this more info, what we can actually do is let me quickly go to our banner component. And if we actually go back to our banner component right here, we'll be able to see all we have to do is we have to just set the show modal to true. So what I'm doing is I'm actually having this button, right? So on this button, what I'm doing is I'm just saying set my show modal to be true, and again I'll just copy this, so we have this state, and all we have to do, and again this is the benefit of using state management library, right? Because the way we are actually doing this is modal is a separate isolated component, and that's how your components should be when you're working on an application. Like that's how components in React should be. They should be well isolated, right? They should be independent of any other components. So because modal is a well isolated component, what happens is inside of this component, if you want to use state, we are actually using something called state management library, and we are actually pulling it from the store directly rather than pulling it from somewhere else, you know. So that's what we are actually doing here, and all we are doing here is we are going to be setting our current movie to be the current movie, and the way we are going to be doing that, and if you remember inside of our modal atom we had a movie state, right? And what we're going to do here is we are also going to have a state for movie. So we're going to say movie set movie, right? And we already had the state on top here, but this is going to be for current movie. So what we're going to change this to current movie, and this is going to actually set the current selected movie, right? It's going to change the current selected movie. And what we can do here is we can, instead of modal state, we can just say movie state here, and we can just auto import this from the modal atom. Now this is really cool. Why? Because we can actually set our movie, and we can actually change our movie as well, right? To the current movie, so we can display that inside of our modal. Now if I actually click on any of this button, here we go, we actually see the modal. If I click back on the overlay, the modal is actually gone. So we are actually seeing the modal, right, by clicking here. But now let's actually work on this modal component. Let's actually work on this. So we actually have the modal now by clicking here. So to work on the modal, the first thing we want to do here is the modal is actually going to be having a button. So inside of the fragment, it's going to have a button, right? And this button is going to have a close icon, basically, because we want to be able to click on that icon and actually close the modal. And this is just going to have X icon from our hero icons pack, and this is going to have some class name of 8.6 and width 6. So as soon as I save it, I can see my crosshair, and what's going to happen is when you click on this button, because you have this beautiful handle close, this function, so when you click here, the modal actually closes, as we can see. So this is what we want to do, and we also want to have some class name for this button, right? So we're going to say the button is going to be a modal button, and this again is a custom class name which we'll create. And I'm also going to say it's going to be position absolute, and it's going to be from right side 5, top of 5, which is going to be 20 pixels. And I'm also forcing a z index of 40 here, so it actually sits on top of our model, and we can see it's on the right side now. And I'm also going to be doing a height of 9 and a width of 9 here, and we're going to say a border of none, and we're also going to say a background. A background is going to be of a custom color like this, and we can see right now we see the background, but it's actually not in the center, right? So to make sure this actually is in the center as well, we're going to be having this custom class name which we're going to be applying to. And we're also going to say on hover, we want to change the background to basically 181818, which is actually the same color. So I don't know why I'm actually doing this, but it's actually the same color on hover. So what we want to do, the next thing, we want to go to our global CSS, so we can apply these custom class names. So we can go to styles and we can go to global CSS, and here name of the class name is actually modal button, so we can copy that, and inside of our modal button now we're going to apply some styling here. First we're going to say display flex, and we're also going to say a height 11, a width of 11. As soon as I do that, it gives a height and width of 11. I'm also going to say item center, so vertically in the center, and we're going to say horizontally in the center as well, and right now it's exactly in the center. And we're also going to say rounded full, so it's actually a circle, and we're going to say border 2. And the reason we're giving borders is because we're going to use this custom class name for the modal buttons, different modal buttons, not only for this one, and that is why we are overriding the border none here. If you see, we are actually overriding because we don't want any border here, but we are going to be using this class name somewhere else on other buttons as well. So we are going to say border 2, which means border width of 2 pixels. And now we want to change the borders color to a custom gray color. We also want to say a background of hashtag 2A, 2A, and 2A, right? So this is going to be the background, and we are also going to be saying, and it's going to be /60, and again this is just the alpha value, the opacity, and we're going to be applying a transition, and we're also going to be saying on hover we want the border to be white. Again, these are for different buttons, the other buttons which we are going to be creating. And we are also going to be saying on hover, we are also going to be changing the background to be white /10. And right now if I hover here, the background actually changes, but I don't want this background to change. That is why I actually applied this hover class here. So now I can clearly see why I applied this background class. So we send 181818. So when I hover here, the background shouldn't change, as you can see. So now we can actually use this custom modal button class name which we just created for our different modal buttons. So let's get back to our modal and let's continue building this. The next thing we're going to be having here is we are also going to be having a div, and inside of this div, this is the cool part, guys. This is where we're going to be fetching using a use effect. We're going to be actually fetching the real-time videos, because in our results back from the server-side render, we weren't actually getting back the videos. We are only getting back the results. So to actually get the single video, we have to use a different URL TMDB API actually provides it, and that's what we are going to be doing today. So the next thing we're going to be doing here is we're going to be using something called React Player to actually get the trailers. So let's first install something called React Player, and React Player is a really popular video player library. So we're going to learn more about this. This is the GitHub. You can see it's really popular, and we want to install this React Player basically. So what we're going to do is install React Player, and the way we actually use this, it actually loads YouTube players, and it's going to be a YouTube video which we're going to be playing. and it's gonna be really sick and has these bunch of props which you can read on the documentation here. Has a lot of props. It's the most popular player for videos and stuff. So what we're gonna do next thing here is that let's get back to our build. Okay, and before actually doing this, so we're gonna have a use effect where we're gonna be fetching each and every single movie. And the reason we're actually gonna be fetching each and every single movie so we can actually play the video, because we need the video for the trailer, right? And the only way this is going to work is if you use this specific URL, which is going to be for each and every single movie. So we have a use effect, right? So we're just going to import it from React, and the way we write the use effect, this is the convention. We have an empty dependency. First thing, we're going to check for a movie. If it doesn't exist, if there is no movie, we're just going to simply return. And where am I actually getting the movie from? I'm actually getting the movie from my my state, if you remember, from the movie state, right? So we're just gonna say movie, movie, and it's actually in the banner. So if I go in the banner and can actually copy this exact state, and this is where we're getting the movie from, right? So we're getting the movie and the set movie. And saying it has implicitly any type, so we need to make sure we actually import the movie type, and we need to make sure that we import useState as well. So now we are checking if there is no movie, we actually return, because we want to make sure that our movie is actually in the state in our store, right? So we want to make sure that that is true, right? If that is actually true, then what we want to do is we want to have a function, right, a synchronous function, and this function is going to be called fetch movie, right? It's going to fetch a single movie, and what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be saying const data, right, and it's going to be, we're going to say await because it's a synchronous function. So I'm going to use fetch, and this is where we're going to be using this URL, and bear with me guys, we're just going to copy this URL because it's going to be a different it's going to be a long URL. So and I want you all to actually copy this. So what we can do is inside of our template strings, we can actually copy this URL inside of our fetch call. Let's go back to our app and let's actually paste this inside of our fetch here. Okay, so what we are actually doing here, so we have this URL called moviedb.org, and then we are actually deciding the media type, right? If the movie.media type is equal to TV, and if it's actually equal, because there are two types of media type for every single movie, and the way I actually get this, so if I press dot, we can see we get this types, right? So, and the media type is basically a type of TV or a type of movie, because it can either be a movie or it can either be a TV series, right? So if it's a TV or if it's a movie, right, and then that's actually the media type, right? And if it's actually the TV, we add the TV in the URL. And if it's actually not the TV, then we add the movie in the URL, right? Then we also check. Then we also we have the movie.id, and then we want to have the API key, which is our next public API key, right? And then we have language. And the last thing, the cool part, is the append to response equals to videos. Now this thing here actually gives us back the videos, and this actually does not work in the request. So I tried adding this in the request here, but this isn't gonna work because this is actually for more than one single result, whereas this thing is only for one single result, and it only works for one single thing. So that's why we're actually using a use effect here, so we can get back this result. Right, and this is going to append all the videos, and then we're going to find from all those videos, we're going to find the trailer for the movie. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to say dot then, because it returns a promise. So we're going to say dot response, and we're going to say return the response as JSON, right? And we can do the catch here, but I'm not going to do the catch now. I'm just going to say if data contains any videos. Right, this is my next step. So I'm just gonna check if the data contains any videos, and we're gonna protect ourselves here by saying optional chaining. Next thing we're gonna say dot const index is equal to data dot videos dot results. Now here we are actually going to find, so what I'm actually doing here is I'm actually finding the index of the video of the type trailer. So before actually doing that, and I think I'm making you all confused. So before actually doing that, let's actually console log what we are actually getting back in the data.videos. So if the data actually contains the videos, let's actually console log the data, what the data actually gives us back. So if we console log the data, and this is going to be dependent on every time the movie actually changes. And because we have this function, the way we actually use a function inside of a use effect is we need to run this function outside the inside the use effect, but outside the function. So we need to call this function, so we need to invoke it right here. And now after invoking this function, we can actually console log. So if I go back here and if I click on any of this, it's going to give me the data, as we can get the data back here. And here if I actually see, this is actually the banner, so this is actually not giving me what I want. And this is only going to run whenever a single movie basically changes. So then it's going to actually run and actually going to set the trailer basically. But what we're going to do here is, let's see, so we're actually getting, so let's remove the console log from our banner so we don't get confused. And let's actually click here on the modal. Right now if I click on any of these modals, because the movie is actually not changing, this is not actually giving us back data here. So if we go back to our modal, what we can do is, instead of doing this, what we can do is set our data. So let's have a piece of state, right? Because what we can actually do is have a piece of state called trailer, and we're gonna have a piece of state called trailer, right? And we're just gonna, or we can just have data for now. Let's just say set data, right? And we can say use state, right? And what we can do here is, after doing this, we can just set the data to the data, right? Now outside the use effect, right outside here, we can console log our data, right? Because we're actually setting the data. So let's see if you're actually getting back anything like this. So if you refresh now, click on this movie, we are still getting undefined. So let's see what we are doing wrong here. Let's see what we are actually doing wrong and what we are actually not getting back the data here. So the URL is correct. The URL is actually correct. We have the movie that's changing as well, and we're actually invoking the function outside the movie here as well. You have the function, you have the data. So let's see where we're actually going wrong here. And we are also checking that if data.genres are actually, so we're actually not doing that. So we can say if data.results. And that's why we're actually saying if data.videos exist, then only we want to actually do this. But we want to console log our data first, right? Because that's what we want to actually do first. Or actually, let's try to, I mean, we can do this, or we can actually say, so this we are doing is, we are actually doing this correctly. I mean, we have the data, we should actually get some sort of data back. From the response here, we should get some sort of data back. And the way we can actually, check this out is maybe it's actually returning as undefined, right? So what we can do is, let's actually change the movie. So let's actually keep the console log here, keep the data here, and let's actually keep this. And what we can do is trigger this modal, trigger this thing by clicking on our thumbnails as well. So let's actually go back to our thumbnail, right? And let's have the same exact functionality for our thumbnails as well. So what we can do is, just like when we are clicking on the more info here, right, which is our banner, we can actually quickly copy this, right? And of course on our thumbnails, when we click this, we want to have the same functionality, and we can also copy the two states here from our banner, and we can put it for our thumbnails here. So because you want the same functionality whenever we click on any of our thumbnails, right? So we want this functionality to exist on the thumbnails, and we want this functionality to exist on the banner itself. So when we click actually here, let's see, because we're actually changing movie, and it's still not working, it's still not returning us back the data. So let's figure this out, like what's actually going on here. It's still not returning us back anything, and the use effect is actually correct, and we have the response back. And let's try to catch for any errors, if there are any errors. Let's say error, and we can just console log error.message. Just console log error.message. So if we try to click here, let's try to refresh here. So still giving us undefined right now. There is no movie. Maybe there is actually no movie. We are actually setting. Oh, that's why it's actually not working. So the problem is not actually working is because there is no movie actually. We are actually not setting the movie correctly. That's what's actually going on. So if we go back to our thumbnail, we are actually not setting the movie correctly. So that's what's sort of happening, because the movie is actually null right now, as you can actually see here, right? The movie is actually null. So if I actually remove this, this should work, and yeah, it does work. It just says at least it says an error message. It says the resource you requested could not be found, right? So the resource we requested could not be. Let's try something else. Still not working. And process the env.next public API key. Let's make sure we have the same API key here. I mean, we do have the API key, but yeah, the thing is we have to say the movie, because we are actually using the movie.id and stuff. So we have to say the movie, but we have to figure out why, because there is no ID. The ID is actually undefined, as in the request we can see. We have to figure out that, and this is where we get into errors and live errors, and I like to solve these errors, to show you guys how I do it. So what we need to here figure out is when we are actually setting our movies, right? So if we go to the banner, right? So we need to figure out that we are actually setting these movies, like setting our current movie to the actual movie, right? So we need to make sure, and we did had a movie here, so that is actually correct. So we are actually setting, but let's actually go back to our modal atom as well, and let's see, this is the movie state, and by default it's going to be null. So let's again go back to our modal, and I think I figured it out. So this is the problem here. So what we are doing is a very silly error from my side. What we are doing is we are using a use state here, instead of using a use recoil state, because this movie which we are getting is actually inside of our recoil store, not in our local state, right? So this movie is actually inside of a recoil state, and this is what we are actually doing wrong. And this is how we figure it out, guys. This is how, by just checking and stuff, this is how we figure it out. This was a kind of a silly, stupid error from my side, because this movie is actually inside of the store. It's not actually stored locally, right? So we are actually pulling this movie from the store, because we are actually, when we are setting the movie, we're actually changing the movie in the store itself, right? Which is in the recoil store. So that's what we should be doing here. And now if I actually try to console log any movie, we will see that we have a movie here. And now if I try to request this and set the data, we should be getting back the data. So if I try to request this, we should be console logging the data or something. So we have the data here, and here we go. I think this works. This works. It's showing me the seasons. It's showing me. It should be showing me the videos as well. So yeah, here we go. We get our videos, and we get our 16 number of videos. So if I click on any other movie, let's say I click here, again, this works because it actually gives us back the videos. Here we go. So now it works. So it was a very silly error, but yeah, we figured it out in the end. So that was the part where we were stuck. So now this is actually working, but what we want to actually do here is we want to make sure make sure to get us, because we just want the trailer, we don't want the whole videos array. So what we basically did here is we just said instead of having a data piece of state like this, what we did is we had a piece of state called trailer, right? And what I did is I just said set trailer is equal to use state, right? And this is going to be a use state this time, and by default it's going to be a string, right? And it's going to be empty, right? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting this to a trailer, right? So what we can do here is we can say inside of our use effect, we can first of all we want to make sure that our videos exist, because the data actually contains videos, and if for any case the videos don't exist, we don't want to do this, right? So we want to make sure our videos exist, and if our data those videos exist, now we're going to actually find the index. And the reason we're actually going to be finding the index is because when we are actually setting the trailer, we want to make sure it's that particular index, right? And the index, the way we're going to be finding it is we're going to say data.videos, and the videos has something called results. Remember, videos had something called results, and we're going to go to the results, and we're going to find index, and find index is a function in JavaScript, and we're going to say for each and every single element, right? And this element is going to be of type element, which we created. If you all remember, in the beginning we actually created a type of element. So if I go to typings, we created an interface of type element. So we can, it's not showing me an auto import, but we can basically just auto just import this. So we can import element. So if I go back here to the top, we can import our element, and it's going to be element from, and it's going to be from / typings, right? So we can see there's the typings. So it's going to be from typings. So what I'm doing here is just importing our element typing, right? And we're providing this to the element type here, right? The next thing we want to do here is this is the find index function, right? And what we want to do is we also want to do this. I want to make sure this closes after this here, right? This here. And the next thing we want to do, because it's a function, right? We want to make sure the element, and now because I give my element a type, I can see element.type exists now. And the element.type is going to give me all these types which I give inside of my typings, right? Which is really, really cool, right? And this is all TypeScript, guys. This is all TypeScript, right? So you can see TypeScript is really useful in these situations, right? Where we have, we want to filter through, or we want to find the index, or we want to just do JavaScript stuff, you know. And TypeScript like really helps us, and you know, gives us this really nice IntelliSense. And this is really sick that if you want to do something like this, you can do it in TypeScript by just like, you know, giving these different values. So it's going to give you all these different values in TypeScript. So we are searching for something called a trailer, and this is actually, by the way, this is a type inside of the API, and this is the reason why I've actually added this to the type definition file, because this is actually a type inside of the API, you know. So we want to find the type with trailer, and as soon as we actually find that, we want to just simply set our trailer to that data.videos. We're going to say data.videos, and we're going to say results. Again, remember there were results inside of our videos, and we want to give this index, right? And we also want to access the key. Now each and every single result has something called a key. So if I actually go right now, if I show you, so we can see videos has results, and for every single result we have an ID, we have a key, we have a different values here, but we are interested in the key because this key is going to allow us to render a YouTube player basically a YouTube video, which is what we are interested in. So we need the actual key here. So that's what we need. So we say we're going to set the trailer to data.videos.results, and we're going to optional change to protect ourselves if it's not found, and we're going to access the key. And after doing this, what we can do after doing this part, we can go down here and we can access the genres, okay? And what we can say, so it has something called genres, and we're going to be needing genres as well. And again, for genres, we're going to have a piece of state. So we're going to say const, and we're going to say genres, and we're going to say set genres, and it's going to be a piece of state. And of course, it's not going to be a string, it's going to be an array, right? And again, we need to provide our type here. And again, in our type definition, we should have a type of genre. So we have a type of genre which contains the ID and the name. So we're going to have this type alongside element. We have a genre type, right? And this is going to be an array of different genres, right? And it's going to contain an ID and a name of the genre. And again, the way I figured this out is by just console logging the API, That's how I actually figured this out. And by default, it's going to be an empty array, right? So what we're going to do here is going to see if data.genres exist, then what we want to basically do is we want to set our genres to data.genres. So that's what we are doing. So we are setting this stuff basically. And that's it. That's our use effect basically. That's all we had to do inside of our use effect. Now, every time when you click on a modal or the movie actually changes, this use effect is going to run. It's actually going to fetch a video for us, and now we can actually use the trailer. And the way we can figure that out is by console logging our trailer, and we can see if it actually gives us back anything. So every time when we actually click on the modal, so if I click on the modal, it actually gives us the trailer. If I click in the modal here, it actually gives us the trailer back again. If I click here, it actually gives us a trailer. So you can see every time when I click on a different movie, it actually gives us back the trailer, which is really, really cool, right? So we have our console log, right? So this is working so far. So we can go back to the application. And now we want to display this trailer when you click on the modal, and we want to display it inside of the modal, right? So let's continue building the modal now. What we can do, the next step is we can have a div, and we install something called React Player. So we're going to be using the React Player, and the way I'm going to be using this, I'm just going to be copying this React Player and then explaining what I just changed some stuff here. So this and React Player, it's a responsive React Player, by the way. And so what's basically happening is, and it's actually from lazy. So actually lazy loads, if you add lazy at the end here, it's going to lazy load your React Player and very nicely actually load the video in. And then we're going to be having a muted state, which is really important, so I don't play the videos with sound. Otherwise, this video is going to get copyrighted. So let's create this muted state right now. This is going to be just set muted, and it's going to be a Boolean state, right? And by default, it's going to be actually true. For you all, it can be false, but for me right now, because I'm recording and making the video, I'm going to keep this by default true because I want this to be muted, the video. But you all can keep it. And as soon as I do this, immediately, as soon as I save this, it's actually playing for me. And the way it's actually working is whenever I click on the modal, there's a React Player. We have a URL. And before the URL, remember, we had the key, right? So we just had the key. And that key is actually the part where whenever you watch a YouTube video, you have something called a V, and then you have the key at the end of the video URL. So that's the key we are actually getting back. And then all we had to do is we had to change this URL prop, which the React Player accepts, to the trailer here. And now we can see as soon as I click here, this actually plays, but this is actually muted right now. So it's not, the sound is not playing. And this is a playing prop, and this is just some styling I've given. Now this is going to be a responsive React Player. And to make it responsive, we have to do something called relative and a padding top. And this is in the documentation, by the way. So they actually explain how do you make this exactly responsive. So you have to give this certain set padding of 56.10 25%, and you cannot change this value because this is what the YouTube player looks like basically. So as you can see right now, the trailers are playing, and these are all dynamic trailers, right? And the cool thing about this is it's only playing the trailers and not anything else. And that's why we found the index, right? So we can find the type with the trailer. So it only plays the trailer. So there's a lot of stuff we learned in this in today's day. We learned a lot of new stuff, right? So let's complete our model. Let's keep building it. It's not yet complete. So outside the React player, we're gonna have a div, right? And we're gonna have another div inside here, and then we're gonna have a button. Now this button is actually gonna be a play button, right? And let me click on my favorite movie, which is gonna be Doctor Strange. This one. This is gonna be my favorite, definitely. So let's keep building. So we're gonna have a play button, and we're also going to be having an icon of FA play, just like how we did it on our banner. So we're gonna have FA play from React icons package, and I'm just gonna quickly auto import it. And this is gonna be height of 7, a width of 7, and it's gonna be a text of black. So we're gonna have this icon. You're gonna have this button. For the button, we can just say, my bad, this icon is actually going to be inside of the button, so it's gonna be right here. And this button is gonna be styled class name, and we're gonna say flex item center to make sure they're vertically in the center. I'm gonna use gap and not space here. The reason I'm using gap and not space is because to give spacing between the button and the play text. And we cannot actually see anything right now. Let's just see why we can't actually see anything right now. And the reason we cannot see anything is because this needs to be absolute, and this needs to be on top of this. That's why we're actually not seeing anything yet. Also the modal, before actually continuing this, let's give some styles for our modal itself, and that's our material UI modal. So we're gonna make it fixed, and I'm gonna use important tags because we want to override the material UI default styling, right? So to override them, I'm just gonna say important, use important. So I'm gonna say top 7. So from top, I want some spacing, right? Left 0, right 0. I'm gonna say z index of 50, so it comes on top of everything. MX of auto, because it's gonna have a max width, basically, and a width of full, and it's gonna have a max width of 5XL. So to centralize it, I'm just actually saying MX auto because this is actually in the center. And if I don't do MX auto, it's not gonna be in the center, as you can see. So to centralize this, I'm saying MX auto. Let's just continue. We're also gonna have overflow hidden, and you're gonna have overflow Y of scroll because you want to be able to scroll in the vertical direction. And we also want to say rounded MD, and we want to hide our scroll bar, so we're just going to hide the scroll bar by saying scroll bar hide. And now our background is actually scroll bar, and we're going to actually prevent that too, by the way. And the way we can actually prevent that is by going to our index page, right? And what we can actually do on our index page, we'll actually do that afterwards, but we have to make sure that our background is not scrollable, because on Netflix it actually sticks, right? So when you click on any new video, it actually sticks. You can see the background is not scrollable. So we need to make sure we have the same behavior. But yeah, this is our video. So let's continue with the styling portion here, because we are not yet done yet. So we have the button here. So we have styled this button. We have this button. Let's keep styling this button. It's gonna be rounded. It's gonna have a background of white, and we still don't see anything. We still don't see our button, right? And that's again because this is not position absolute. So let's make sure to style this div first. Let's make it absolute, and as soon as I make it absolute, we can see the button now. And you want to make sure this is going to be bottom 10, right? It's going to be displayed flex, and it's going to be a width of full, and we're going to say item center, and we're also going to say justify between and a padding left and right of 10. And after this, we're gonna start the div before this button. We're gonna say it's gonna be display flex and a space x of 2, right? Because it's gonna have one more button here, right? And this button is actually going to be for adding stuff to our list, basically. So it's gonna have a plus icon. Basically, it's gonna have a plus icon, which is again from hero icons. So we're gonna have this button. So let's continue building this. So we have a background white here. We also want to make sure we have some sort of padding left and right of 8. We want to make sure the text is Excel. We also want to make sure the font is bold for the text, and we want to make sure the text is actually black so we can actually see the text. And we also want to make sure to have a transition. So I'm just going to say transition, and we're going to say on hover we want the background to actually be changed to a different color, which is going to be E6, E6, E6. So when I actually hover over the button, we can see the background is actually changing. So that's it for this button, basically. And now we're going to be having, so we have this button, and now we can actually work on the modal button, right? So this is actually going to be the next one is actually going to be the modal button. So this button right here is going to be actually the modal button, the custom class we created. So it's going to be a modal button. And as soon as I actually do that, my play button changes to maintain the item center, you know, and we can see the modal button right there. And of course, the plus icon is really huge, so we can say height of 7 and width of 7 to make sure it actually sticks. And right now, it's actually looking really, really nice, right? We are actually close to our end result here. So after this button, we're going to have one more button, and this is going to be for our thumbs up. Basically, it's going to be a thumb up icon, and again, this is imported from hero icons. So it's going to be thumb up icon, and again, it's going to have a button styling of modal button, so we get the same styling everywhere. But this button is actually going to be dynamic, because when you click here, it's going to be changed to a tick mark, and it's going to add the movie or add the movie to our list, right? And that's going to be inside of our Firebase, by the way. It's going to add the movie directly to the database. But we'll do that in the end. The next thing we're going to be doing is outside this div here, we want to have another button, basically. And this button is for the volume, right? Because we want to control the volume. So we want to have, so if our muted is true, which is a piece of state which we created, we want to have a certain icon, and that's going to be the volume up icon, right? Sorry, volume off icon, because if it's the muted is true, we want to have the volume off icon. And if it's not true, then we're going to have the volume up icon, the volume, and we're going to say volume up icon. And this is how we use a ternary operator. So we have these two icons, and we can say class name of, for both of them, we can say class name of height of 6 and a width of 6, basically. And you can just copy this one and just put it right here as well. So we can see the button now, the volume button. And what's going to happen is when you actually click on the button, what it's going to do is going to actually set the muted, set the muted to actually the opposite of whatever the muted state is right now. So if it's actually muted, it's going to turn it back unmuted, and if it's unmuted, it's going to turn it back to mute. So it's going to change it to the opposite when you actually click on this button, right? So that's what we're going to be doing. So we have our, and right now because it's muted, it's actually showing us this. It's actually showing us. And one thing we forgot is to add our custom button which we created, which is a modal button, to make sure that it actually looks like this. So right now, even if I play the video, it's actually muted. So I can show you, or you can see. But this is really cool. So this is actually working now. So we have this button. Now after this button, outside the container div here, which contains our React player and everything. Outside this container div, we're gonna have another div, right, for the bottom section, which is gonna be this beautiful section right here. It's gonna be this beautiful section which we're gonna be creating, and this is our last thing we're gonna be doing for today. So we have done the authentication, and this is going to be our last thing, because this is going to be our modal functionality complete. So then we can work on the plan screen and the profile screen, so the user can actually subscribe to different plans, and that's going to be for the last day to finish the build and style, you know. But yeah, so let's work on this functionality now. So let's work on this portion now. So to work on this, we're going to have a div inside of this, and we're going to have another div, and this div is going to contain 2 p tags basically. So I'm just going to say p multiplied by 2 to have 2 p tags. Now these 2 p tags, the first one is going to actually have a movie, and remember we are actually having a movie, right, which is what we are getting back from our store, right? So we have the movie, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say this is going to have the movie dot vote average, right, and we're going to actually multiply this vote average by 10 because it's going to be a percentage value, and we're just going to type match here, right, and we can see it's a 0% match because this movie is not out yet. So it's a 0% match. So we have the match here. The next thing we want to do is inside of the second p tag, we want to have movie dot release date, or we can have movie dot first air date, right? And it's option chaining, protecting us the TypeScript, you know, so we don't get into weird errors. So we have the release date for the movie. Next thing we can do is we want to have a div, and this div is actually going to say ht. What it's actually going to do is we're going to have a class name here, and we're going to style this ht box. We're going to say flex. It's going to have a height of 4. It's going to have item center. It's going to say justify center as well. So it's going to be justify center. It's going to be rounded. It's going to have a border, and the border is going to be the color of white and an opacity of 40. And we're also going to say padding left and right of 1.5, and text is going to be extra small. And I'm just going to quickly save it. And as soon as I actually save it, we get our HD thing here. But of course, we need to style the container for them. Container, I'm just going to say display flex item center, and we also want to say space x between the children of 2, and we also want to say the text of small, right? And as soon as I do that, already looks so much better, but we want to style our p tags. So let's style our p tags. Let's say font of semi-bold. Font is going to be semi-bold, and also the text is going to be green of 400. So the text is actually going to be green of 400 because this is actually a green text in Netflix. The next part, we're going to style like class name, and again we're going to say here for the next p tag, we're just going to say a font of light, actually, because this is actually a light font. So I'm going to say font of light, and we've already styled this div, right? Let's actually work on the next part now. The next part is going to be the description, right? And it's going to be the overview, basically the movie overview. So let's actually work on that part now. So what we can do is we can have a div here, and this div actually contains a p tag, which actually contains our movie, and actually contains our not overflow but actually overview. So it contains our movie overview, and this is the movie description. Now if you want, you can truncate this, and in Taven, you know, it's very easy to actually truncate this, but I'm not going to be truncating this because it's going to be a modal, right? And you want to be able to actually show this. So I'm not going to be truncating this text, but rather keeping it like this. But I'm going to show you all how you can do that if you want to. So we have the movie.overview, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a class name of 5x6 actually, which is 83%. So I'm going to make it slightly less width here, so it doesn't take the full width. Next thing, we're going to have a div here, and this div is actually going to have another div, and this div is going to have a span tag, and it's going to say genres, because remember we have a state of genres, And what we're going to do here is we're just going to say genres. And again, TypeScript already knows because you're giving types, right? So it already knows that this is an array. So to every single genre, what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be saying genre, and we have the type of name. And last thing we want to do is we want to make sure to join them, right? And we want to join them basically by a comma like this. So it basically adds a comma in between the genres like this, which is really nice, right? And the next thing we want to do, we want to make sure our class name for genres is text of gray. So this is a custom gray color for our genres. So we are actually done with this part. The next part I want to do actually is this div which contains this whole thing. Actually, let's style this. This is going to be flex. It's going to be flex column. It's going to be space y of 3, and it's also going to be text of small. So make sure all the text inside here is actually small, right? And we actually didn't finish the styling here. So for this container div, actually, I'm going to style this, and what we're going to be doing here, this container div which is above our p tags, which is actually containing, if you guys can see, this is containing our these two divs, right? What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be saying space y between the children, so some vertical spacing between them, and we're also going to be saying text large. So text is actually large for the overview here, as you can see. So this is done. Now the next part we want to say, we also want to style the whole overall container here, and for this part we want to give it a background. First we want to display flex. We want some space between the children of 16, and we also want the rounded but only from the bottom, right? The rounded but only from the bottom, which means rounded bottom left and bottom right radius. And we want a background custom color of 181818, and we also want padding left and right of 10, and we want some vertical padding of 8. And as soon as I actually do that, I have a beautiful background color. And if I don't give this padding, it's going to look awful right there. So just give some padding to make it look really nice. If I make this bigger, it has some rounded corners, as we can see, right? And it's completely responsive, by the way. It's completely responsive. So we are actually getting there. We're quite close. We're actually getting there slowly. So now let's actually style this div, which is containing our p tags here, our movie.overview basically. So for this container div, what we want to do is we want to say this is going to be displayed flex. It's going to be a flex of column direction. It's going to have some gap values of 10. It's also going to have some gap y values of 4, and it's going to have font of light, and it's also going to have on a medium breakpoint, it's going to change into a flex version of row. Now what I'm actually doing here is I'm changing this to a flex version of row on a medium breakpoint. So if you can see, if I go to a bigger screen size, it actually gets side by side, right? The genres. But as soon as I go smaller screen size, it actually gets right in a flex column direction, which is very responsive, right? Which is how Netflix is actually doing. So that's what I'm actually doing here, right? The next thing we want to do is we want to continue building our genres, and now we're going to be having some stuff on the, if you look at here, some original language and some total words here, which will be the last thing we want to be having. So let's actually work on that now. So after the genres.map, we're going to have another div here, and this div is actually going to have a span tag again, and the span tag is going to contain the movie.original language, which is going to be like this. Now this div actually, the span actually is going to have, and this is actually going to be outside of the span, by the way. So this is going to be outside of the span, and the span is actually going to be having original language, which is kind of the heading, right? Which is what it's going to show. So original language like this. Or we can give some spacing here like this. And this original language is going to be class name again, and it's going to be text of gray. So I'm just going to say text of custom gray color like this. The next thing we want to do is we want to have another div after this, and this is going to be for movie the work count. And these are some just random values I'm putting in here. If you want to put some other values, feel free to just put those values. And it's dynamic from the API, so remember it's going to be changing for every single movie. You know, so these are some dynamic values, so we're not hard coding anything basically, and we're going to say text gray for this as well, right? And again, this text gray is not going to be here, it's actually going to be a span tag. So I'm just going to quickly copy this and put a span tag here, and this is going to be total votes actually, just like this. And as soon as I do that, I'm actually done. Now if I go to a bigger screen, you can see it gets side by side, completely responsive design. Actually click here, you know, this is Eternals, but we can see it's working really nicely. It's completely responsive, and we have actually completed our modal. So our modal component is done. The UI, at least for the modal, is done. There are still some things remaining, so when you click on the add, we want this movie to be added to the database and stuff, but that's the only things that are remaining. So far we have actually completed our modal component, and it works really nicely. So yeah, this is like really nice. What we can do now is, I think day 2 is actually complete now, because we have actually done our models. But let's try and test different movies. Let's try and test different movies. Let's try and test like different bunch of movies and see if they're playing. So for some movies there might be no videos, and what you can do to handle that is you can just what you can do for some videos where the videos are not playing, you can just add a fallback here. So if there are no trailers or the videos are not playing, just add a fallback here by just saying or, you know, so if there is no video, we can add a fallback, and that's gonna play that particular fallback video. And that can be a GIF or something, just a simple thing. It's gonna say like the video is not found or something, so you can add that. But most of them there are videos, so we can see these videos are playing, and there are different collections, and yeah, these are all working as we can see, and it's working really nicely. And these are dynamic, by the way, so really cool. So we are actually done, I would say, with day 2. The stuff which is remaining, there is some stuff which is remaining. There's gonna be React Toast, which we are gonna be using, you know, for just the toast stuff. So if I go to the finished build here, and if I actually add this to our database, this is React Toast, by the way, a React Hot Toast. And if I remove this, you can see it actually gives us these messages. And I tried to make it as close to as how Netflix looks like, but yeah, this is React Hot Toast basically. So we're going to be adding that library as well, and this is completely responsive. And so far, yeah guys, it's we're done with today, guys. So really nice, really nice. A lot of stuff to learn today. We literally learned so much stuff today, guys. You know, a lot of new UI stuff, some JavaScript, you know, and we created this beautiful UI, right? So in day 3, we're actually going to be finishing with our build. We're going to be building our plan screen, which is the table layout, which I'm going to be showing everyone. And we're also going to be building our account screen, our profile screen, and we're going to be connecting to Stripe. And before we actually start day 3 tomorrow, what I want all of you to do basically is, if you are on this project, make sure you upgrade this project to the Blaze plan, because you can see in my finished build, I'm actually on the Blaze plan here. So all you have to do is actually go here and upgrade this. And the reason you want to upgrade this is because we'll be using an extension called, if you go to extensions here, we'll be using an extension called Stripe Firebase extension. And for some reason my Firebase is just lagged out right now. Yeah, so we get these extensions, and we're going to be using run payments with Stripe. So this is the extension we're going to be using. And to actually use this extension, you can see we need the Blaze plan. Your project must be on the Blaze plan. So it does not actually charge us. You can see due to services in addition to any charges, and because you're just using for our testing and stuff, it's not going to charge us for anything. We're just going to be using testing cards. So don't worry, it's not going to charge you, but just upgrade your project and review these steps. You know, I want you all to review these steps, you know, So you must have a Google Cloud. So it's going to take you to Google Cloud Console, where you'll have to actually confirm your billing profile and just set up the billing. And after you do that, just make sure to check this stuff. And after you're on this stuff, and of course, I'm going to show everyone how to install this extension. So don't worry about the steps from step 2. Just set up step 1, which is the setup billing, which is just upgrade to like Blaze plan. And you can do it from here. You don't even have to go to extension. Just upgrade, and you can just select this plan and just continue and just add. And don't worry about the extension. I'm going to be showing all the other steps tomorrow during the build. So the last thing for today is let's actually deploy this application, because we have actually completed the Modal functionality, and it works really nicely. And one more thing we should check is if our logout is actually working. So if I try to access my app, you can see actually access something else. So I actually try to access my app, you can see actually redirects us back to login, because I'm not actually logged in right now. So that's really nice, right? And if I try to click sign in, I'm actually signed in right now. So our application is beautiful. It's actually working. The whole functionality, the modals and everything. Now let's actually deploy this application to Vercel again. So again, the way we're going to be doing that is we have 14 changes, as we can see. So what I'm going to do is make this bigger first of all. Let's say get status, right? All these files which are red, we want to add this to our staging area. So I'm just going to say get add dot, right? And then I'm going to do get status again, and now they become green, as you can see. Next thing you want to say get commit, and we're going to commit. We're going to say day 2 complete, right? Day 2 complete, and this concludes the day 2. So I'm just going to say get commit day 2 complete. And now next thing, as soon as I do that, my changes are committed. Now all I have to do is I have to say get push, and as soon as I do that, we can go back to our GitHub. And this is the cool thing about Vercel, which I want to show you all. So if you go to Vercel now, we will actually see that if I go to deployments, it's actually building. So it has re-triggered a deployment already for me. And the way it actually does that is because we are actually building this on our GitHub, right? So if I go and click here, and if I go and access my main branch from here, and you can see this is actually yellow. So some checks haven't completed. So Vercel is actually re-triggering a deployment on its own. And we can actually click here and we can check if it's, and if there are any type errors we are facing, it's going to actually prevent us to deploy this app, and we can fix the type errors before deploying this. So it's actually building us. Let's wait for it, and this is going to turn green on your GitHub as well. And we have committed the changes. We can see day 2 complete, So we have all this done. And let's see, yeah, it's ready right now. So this is done, and this should give us, oh, beautiful, we have our login page. Now one thing which you want to basically add, or actually we don't want to add anything, so that's for social logins. But yeah, next thing you want to do is you want to click on assigning domains, and want to click on the custom domain. So this domain which you're using, right, which is right there. So you want to click here, and we actually see this beautiful login page, right? And it's completely responsive. And now let's see if our error handling, so our error handling is working too. Now let's actually try to log in. Let's try to use this account, and if I try to sign up, it's saying email is already in use because I'm already a existing user, so I need to sign in. So actually sign in, boom, here we go, we are redirected back to the app, and we're seeing this movie. So I actually click here. Oh, the trailers are working, really beautiful. One thing we actually forgot to fix is that we didn't want this scrollable background, this scrollable thing, which we didn't want it. So the fix is actually really easy. All we actually have to do is we have to go back to our home page, and if I go back to our home page, right at this home page, what we actually have to, if our modal is actually true, so we have the show modal, right? So what we can do here is we can just use our template strings here. So turn on my backticks here, put my backticks, and what we can do here is we can just say show modal. If our show modal is actually true, what we can say is we can enforce the height to be just screen and the overflow to be hidden. And what this is going to do is going to give a height of screen and the overflow to be hidden, so we don't actually do the scrolling. So now if we actually click on any of this, and so this is actually the deployed build, my bad. So if I go back here and if I click on the same, let's say, movie, and we can clearly see right now we cannot scroll anymore. And to deploy these changes again, so if you want to ever change anything, you know, design your own, just change some design stuff, just, you know, change some UI stuff and whatever you want to add, right? And you want to push those changes again to GitHub, to Vercel. What you can do is we can see get status, file is read. So you can say get add dot, right? And we can say get status. And now we can actually commit this. We can say get commit. And what we can say is we can say added, you know, fix the bug or something. Let's say fix the bug or any message. And then we can just say get push, right? And we actually say get push, and we go back to GitHub or Vercel or anywhere, you know. You can see it all started building already, you know, and it's fixing a bug. So it's going to build up for us, retrigger the build, the deployment, and then it's going to update the deployment here. So that's it, guys. I mean, that's pretty much it for day 2. Like a lot of stuff we learned, like a lot of new stuff, created our own model, completely functional, you know, and we deployed it as well in the end, fixed the bug, you know, fixed the UI bug which we faced. So it should typically fix this bug, shouldn't be scrollable anymore. And yeah, I mean, this model is really beautiful, right? Because it's adding the overlay as well in the background, and we didn't have to do any of that by ourselves. So that's really, really nice about Material. And right now we can see the production current branch is updated to this one. Now if I refresh our build, let's see. So here we go. And if I actually click here we go. This is updated. So we cannot scroll anymore. And this is really beautiful, right? So, and this concludes the end of day 2, guys. And now just make sure you upgrade to the Blaze plan for tomorrow, for the day 3, so we can complete the plan screen and the profile screen and all that stuff. And you guys can add this sick build to your portfolio and change any of the stuff and any things you need. And let me know if anyone has any questions regarding this this video. If you don't understand anything, join the Discord community. By the way, we have a Discord group, and you know, I'm really active in the Discord group. I try to do my best to answer as many questions as I can. So try to join on the Discord, or try to just, you know, just shoot a question in the chat, in the comments, you know. And as always, I'll see you guys tomorrow. So take care.